Ground zero. All right. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Carlos, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. I'm really excited to be speaking to you. First time not giving a technical talk. And so the topic, or what I'd like to talk about, is finding focus in support of inspiration and innovation, otherwise known as Eureka. Now what? Um, for those who might be disappointed, this is not a talk about Netflix, so sorry, Darren. I hope you'll stay anyway. But first, just to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Owen Buckley. I'm a principal UI architect at Clarivate Analytics. On the side, I like to dabble in various open source activities. Just been getting more into some of the local community projects and groups around here. Usable social media outlets and all those things if you fancy that. But at the bottom, I think, is kind of the inspiration, at least for me, to give this talk. Something that I kind of figured out about myself only recently, even though it's probably something I was doing the whole time. Just realizing that one of my, I think, skills anyway, is helping make technology more accessible to other people, either people that are learning technology or maybe people in the position to be hiring people to build technology, make sure they do it right, make sure that they're going to get what they want. And so from that, and kind of coming into that recently, the past couple of years myself, just kind of getting a better understanding of what my contribution to a community or an organization would be, kind of helped me realize that I'd like to give a talk like this. So hopefully, some of the lessons that I've learned from working in technology combined with some of the community members that have helped me with this presentation, who I'll call out a little later on, can help you in your areas of focus and creativity. So just to kind of lead into the topic a little bit more, the idea behind this was mostly inspired from work experiences. But I think it certainly applies to at least my open source projects, and it's a common enough that I've seen it, for so long that I thought it'd be great to kind of talk about what exactly it means to be a problem solver, solve challenges, have ideas and inspiration for creativity, but maybe be in a position where you have that, but not really know what to do with it or the best way to get there. Like, you haven't been working as a contractor for 10 years, so when you have this idea of like, oh, if I can make this talk with that, that's a night's work for somebody, but for yourself, you might not even know where to begin, but the idea itself, sticks with you. Or you might try, you might fail, you might feel frustrated, you might not know how to kind of back up or start over again. So kind of what this talk is about is really being able to kind of go from this to the end result that you're looking for without necessarily breaking everything along the way. I agree that most people would like to move fast. I disagree that most people actually want to break things as they go, which I guess I did. Does anybody, Carlos? Did the projector go off? Hope I wasn't going too fast.
You went too fast.
I went too fast. Just been a humbling experience overall tonight.
So there's an issue with Mac.
pause the presentation for a few minutes. Is everything that I need to record?
You're on this one for now?
Thanks.
Now that we do that, it wanted to wait until we were really sure we weren't going to use it. We should just do it on this. So what do you want to do? We can try it again. All right.
All right, Zuckerberg to that.
It is very nearly a beautiful thing. Yeah. No.
All right. All right, so now with Moore's Law out of the way. Well, I don't know how fast I was going, but case in point, I think we can all agree no one really likes broken things. So if anything, the hope with this talk is to kind of help provide that light in the dark without necessarily getting too far ahead of yourself that we end up having to put software developer on this list. And so hopefully I can kind of impart that with kind of a little more thought and deliberation before just jumping right into your tasks. You can get better results with arguably less time. I know a lot of times people get scared when they say, well, I'm not actually coding, but it's all still work. Problem solving, I found, is a lot less to do with the actual coding part and the actual solving of the problem itself. In fact, I find most of my experiences in technology is often the least challenging or intricate part once you kind of learn it, and it's more about the communication and the context of the question or the project or the collaboration that you're working on. And so it's really those human touch points that I find really make for a lot more successful projects and iterations or just whatever you're working on. And so, I hope to cover that a little bit more now. So, kind of set the night up a little bit, the talk. So, kind of broken down the collective experiences and feedback into these first three sections. So, kind of how to plan, then how to execute, and kind of how to reflect and kind of get into a cycle of these first three. I'll talk a little bit about a little project I've been working on the side. I haven't gotten to the last couple of sections, but from an example of kind of how to think about approaching a project before you even start coding, got a little bit there. Mostly, I want this to be a talk for you guys, so I want to make sure there's plenty of time for questions, or if you need to pause along the way, it's very much an engagement for us. and so I hope you feel comfortable participating, and then I'd like to close out with some thoughts. And also we'll take some time during the open forum to highlight some of the community members that helped me with this and that are available for you to connect with yourself. So to kick things off, so and again, I speak as mostly from my own personal experience, but also collective experience. It's not necessarily one size fits all, but the common experience has been that I found that a little more upfront planning definitely pays off in the long run. This phrase "measure twice, cut once" is generally used more in carpentry circles, but I think it's one that I like to use quite a lot. Oftentimes in projects, especially work projects, the idea of not always coding tends to freak managers out. Even though the whole point of not coding is to figure out, well, is this going to be small? Is this going to be long? Do I know all the information I need to even give you an estimate in the first place, so you don't hold me accountable to a thing that's called an estimate? So, it can be a very cyclical cycle, good or bad, during this phase. And I think being able to kind of understand from a domain perspective what you're working on, the actual if you're working in like financial tech, like the actual objects in the system of the banking software that you're using, if it's something with containers that you really have a good understanding of what the technology is, what's going on there. Because inevitably when things break or when things go wrong, the more you're familiar with what you're working with in the beginning, the less susceptible you'll be to getting kind of knocked off track. In some circles, this is akin to like domain-driven development. It's really just trying to establish maybe like a language or a taxonomy or set of things that really capture well what you're trying to work on. And it's typically, it could be as simple as just defining what done is, right? Just like, I want to work on something. What do I expect to get at the end of it? Is it a report that I'm writing? Is it an article? Is it something on a microcontroller? Just being able to articulate what those are, at least to yourself, puts you in a much better position, if you end up wanting to collaborate, if you need to pull people in, if you need to ask for help yourself. Being able to articulate that back to someone else is going to make that interaction with someone a lot easier, not only for yourself, but for them. And it's also a really good opportunity to avoid solutions in search of problems. They say, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Some technologies are really cool. They work really well in certain situations. It doesn't mean you should use them all the time. Usually trying to identify what the problem calls for in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, and then exposing yourself to more technology is really just about giving yourself more options. It's not necessarily about landing on something that you need to use all the time. So to that point, being a contractor for so long, I really, for the beginning there, I really treated "it depends" as a meme. I've almost changed it now into a personal slogan. It's not, I know it kind of has a bad connotation in those circles, but I think it just really emphasizes the fact that most problems need to be looked at within the context of themselves and really derive the solution from that. Your past experiences can help influence if something you've done before is applicable to this situation. But you should always be open to looking for new ways to solve a problem if there's better options out there. This is another good opportunity to kind of really take a holistic look at the whole thing you're trying to build. Like one good example, if you're trying to build a website, you got a few pages, just go page by page. It's just as simple as identifying like your common components. Maybe you're making some back-end calls. You can kind of map out the commonalities between all of them. You might find that, hey, if you do these half a dozen components and these 3 services, you might be able to get like 2.5 pages done in one sprint. So it can really help with the long-term planning. Just give yourself a better idea of how you should proceed and what you might expect to encounter at each stage. So the little blurbs start with why, something that I've started to, that I learned from a speaker called Simon Sinek. It's, in programming terms, it's pretty much akin to domain-driven development, but the idea being that if you make sure to understand the core essence of what you're trying to do, like what the goal is, like if you're at your job and you're working on designing some architecture maybe for your company, trying to understand like what their hope and dreams are with this thing can certainly give you a better appreciation of when you need to make certain decisions, which paths are better for you to go down. Understanding that which one ends up being more valuable to the final outcome essentially just helps you build up a sort of intuition in the product and what you're building. And again, I kind of say product like it's based on work experience. It is, but I apply these same similar kind of considerations to my own projects, and I find that just having essentially building up this little methodology, just yields results in all sorts of different endeavors. And so eventually, at some point, you'll be ready to start work. This is, I think, where most of us, certainly at least I did in the beginning, would kind of run to just kind of start working. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, sometimes you have hackathon style projects or ideas, or you just have an itch to scratch. That's that's fine. But I think if you have an idea that you're trying to develop over a period of time, settling into this phase really benefits from having that initial phase of trying to understand the holistic look at what you're trying to do. One of the first things I could definitely recommend is just start a README, installation instructions, like just even overview of what this thing is. So when you share it with people, they know that they're looking at the right thing. They can get started without necessarily having to, have you explain it all to them. It can go a long way to fostering good collaboration. It's also really useful for yourself when inevitably you don't work on it for a couple months, you come back and you forgot how to start it up or install it yourself. So, and so one thing to really remember in that process, inevitably you will encounter things that that don't work the way that you expected the first time, bugs, challenges in the actual execution. One thing that I was fortunate enough to be taught early on was the art of debugging. Whether you're working in a browser, you're working in Node, you're working some backend language, there's going to be a log, there's going to be a console, there's going to be something that you can use to find out where the error is. If something's not happening, use a log, print to the console. You don't have to use any fancy debuggers, but there is something. You don't have to guess. If there's one thing I can stress during this part is you don't have to guess. It's going to be there somewhere. 99.9% of the time, it's there. And now that's, if that, for that other, well, I shouldn't say all the time, but when you do encounter errors specifically for that, trust the error message. Now, there's going to be other times where something's not working. It's not necessarily because of an error. It's just maybe the logic or the design of what you're working on. For that, there is no real error message to tell you that you're doing anything wrong. However, you can get a lot of mileage out of getting a little rubber duck and putting it on your desk and talking to it whenever you are getting stuck. It's similar to, if you've ever been on Stack Overflow, they actually have a really good post on how to actually ask a good question. But the criteria and the interaction is essentially the same. You kind of step through what you're working on, you talk to the duck or this object as if you're talking to a friend, like here's what I'm trying to do. You literally just step through it. Oftentimes that will help yield an insight into the problem that you might not have been aware of being so deep in the code. So just being able to take a step back, take a walk, take a break, talk about it, either to a colleague or even just the rubber duck, might yield a lot of results there. And even if you're working by yourself, I would strongly recommend using version control, save early, save often. You never know when you want to try different things, kind of branch off, experiment, but always have a place to go back to. Even when I'm working by myself, I still like to work in branches. It also provides a really nice history of what you've been up to. So in those moments when you need to come back after, say, a couple weeks or a couple months, it's really easy to get caught up if you have a nice history in your version control. Yeah, and so it's really just a matter of identifying from the beginning those tasks that you kind of set up. You could even break down tasks into smaller, and they each have their own little measurable objectives. But it's really just trying to take it one foot after the other. And so throughout the process, it's always good to have a retrospective or reflect on the measurement of your progress. Depending on how long running or short running the task is. It's always good to make sure that whatever you're working on is actually achieving the results that you're hoping for. It's forward progress, forward momentum. It's okay, if there's a theme in this talk, it's that it's okay to just not code for a minute and to actually think about the problem and assess that, maybe the technology is doing more, is making it harder to achieve what you want than you thought. It's okay to recognize that the decision that you made was maybe the wrong one, was the wrong tool, the wrong design, the wrong pattern. That's okay. That's why it's good to have these incremental checkpoints to catch them. You'll be a lot happier to find it, say, 2 weeks into working on it than maybe 12 weeks working on it, to a point where you might have to backtrack so much that you might just get frustrated at the thought of that. So, and with that, you have to embrace the victories and the learning lessons. They're not necessarily mistakes if you, or they're not necessarily in vain if you can learn from them. So we all make them. They're probably certainly going to end up being the most memorable things about some of the projects that you work on, some of the things that you do. I certainly tend to recall some of those missteps a little bit more, not necessarily to beat myself up, but it's certainly just, it's valuable experience building for sure, or certainly learn from the mistakes of others and manage to avoid them so far. So, and then lastly, being able to ask for help is important. A big part of kind of why it's good to kind of set this methodology for yourself is when you do need to reach out, if you need to open, say, a GitHub issue, or you want to send a friend an email, or you have something to share, having a good understanding of and articulation of the problem or your project, make sharing it with others a lot more practical. The more context that you can provide them, the easier it is for them to get caught up. So it's all works together in the sense to kind of establish this kind of ongoing ebb and flow within whatever you're doing. These are, again, just kind of a collection of suggestions and experiences from others in the community. So I think everybody ends up making their own workflow over time, but certainly as like a reference point of some things to think about if you were getting stuck or needed a place to start from. Dope. Carlo. If it's too hot, I know how it feels.
Afterwards, she said, it'll be super easy. That's no break, right? I
Luckily, there aren't too many more slides left, so. Thank you, Carlos. Excuse me. Okay. So to kind of make things a little more concrete, kind of try and tie things together a little bit more, I've started a project, or basically this is an idea of my own that that I had a little while ago, but started to kind of think about more in terms of like a little side project. It was coinciding well with this talk, so I figured I'd kind of use a little bit of it as a demonstration. So if you're familiar with Shazam, it's an app that lets you grab a snippet of music, like a song like that's playing through your phone, and it'll look it up and tell you what it is. So taking that concept, sticker picker, if you go to any conference, you're going to get inundated with stickers to put on your laptop. So in the spirit of Shazam, if you take a picture of a sticker, it'll look it up and tell you, hey, this is Webpack or Terraform, and then you can decide if it should go on your laptop case. So, so as an example of kind of my approach to kind of breaking this problem down now, certainly all the actual action items on the right could get broken down even further, but just to kind of set on the left kind of these requirements of, from a user perspective, how they could use this, and what would be on me to actually implement that from the technology perspective. So pretty straightforward. Allow user to take an image with their phone. That image would then get sent to some back-end service. It would then get processed. The image processing would happen, and then it would return any information that it can find back to the phone. So for each of those steps, one thing I wanted to do was, so this was partially an example, a case where I wanted to try out some new things, like developing a progressive web app and playing around more with cloud functions. So in this case, I was, able to leverage idea as an opportunity to try and use some things that were new to me. So it's always nice when you can have that marriage of creativity, but also applied technology that's interesting to you. I find that's one of the best ways to work on side projects anyway, if you're looking to learn more about something. But to correspond to the basic kind of user flows on the left, so develop a PWA with picture taking capabilities, create a cloud function that would accept the binary or string representation of that image over an HTTP request in the cloud. Take that, have it processed, maybe a Google reverse image lookup or some sort of image processing library, and then respond back to the mobile app with the name, maybe the homepage URL of the tool. Maybe nice to have a confidence score that says, how closely I think this is actually the thing that you took a picture of. And I took a little time just to make a quick little diagram just to help visualize for myself the flow of all the data, the flow of the user, help identify where certain technologies will need to come into play. Do I know them well enough? Might I want to look more? Right now, the first thing I probably want to do is take a little more time into the actual image processing section. There's probably a couple options. Probably want to figure that out. But in general, it starts at the top with the actual logo itself. That would get its picture taken with the phone, go up to the cloud function. The image processing would happen. Like I said, maybe it goes out to Google to do a reverse image lookup, comes back with any information that it can find, sends it back to the phone, and if we're successful, then we've got a developer with a brand new sticker on their laptop, and mission accomplished. So, but anyway, that's just an example of just my approach. Some of these things I find are useful for myself in terms of articulation and collaboration, and if I was stuck on something, someone, like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So even something like this can help bring it all together for someone who doesn't live in the headspace that I have been for this. That's something that I think is often overlooked, is that context, especially when people ask for help. And it's it's totally understandable. Your head is totally in the thing that you're working on. You've been working on it for days, weeks. You're so into it that when you come up for air, the first thing on your mind is the last thing that you were working on, whether it's some bug or trying to implement some tool or technology. But that person you're talking to hasn't been on the entire journey that you have. So for them to get where you are, could take, sorry, you have to keep that in mind. And so, if I think back to having that README, that's a really quick way to get someone caught up to speed, show them an image, they can probably get the whole story right away. So anyway, just some thoughts there, and just something I wanted to share, just again to mainly serve as a reference for anybody. So I'd like to take a moment to do a couple things. First thing, I'll pull up a slide. I'd like to recognize some of the people that helped me with this, and some of the people that contributed, filled out a survey, and then also open it up for any questions from the audience. So first, I do have a few people that actually filled out this long survey that I wrote, so I want to thank them in particular. Some of them aren't here, but you can find all of them on the Providence Geek Slack channel, so if you don't know what that is, definitely let me know. But Brian Jepson, who's a content manager at LinkedIn and the co-founder of Providence Geeks, Paul Barry in the back, front-end technical architect here at Kenson, my former boss, John, Donnie, CTO for Kenson, Tim Egan, the co-founder of Providence JS, and Sue Lee, who's the co-organizer and co-founder of River, the group and the Slack meetup. And of course, Victoria, who basically helped me get to this point in general, just made sure I wasn't talking out of my butt the whole time. So with that, I'd love to just take a pause for myself, but if there's any questions, any thoughts from anybody, I'd be happy to take them now.
Yeah, Owen.
What's up, Ben?
That's a pretty cool project.
Oh, thanks, yeah.
So would it work in any kind of branded image besides just geek stickers?
Well, yeah,
I
think it probably would, but conference is the gimmick of going with, so but yeah, I'm sure if you took a picture of anything, it would do it. But for instance, what I might do as part of this to tailor it to this particular application is I might preset some filters. So if I was going to do the image, reverse image lookup in Google, if it allows me to pass some sort of query parameters, I might specify software or something like that just to help narrow the search. Or it could be something where I start with that, see if I get a good hit, and then if I don't find anything within that's a reasonable confidence, I can maybe expand the search and try again. And those two both, don't result in anything. I can say I couldn't figure it out, or the cost would be that confidence score. I'll just determine it out and be like, this is 50-50. But I haven't gotten that far yet. So, but that's just what, based on the initial research, those are the things that are spinning wheels in the back of my head. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. So, just to close on some thoughts and reflect on some of the things that I covered. So, I think if one thing I certainly want to emphasize is that I think everybody kind of tries to find their own methodology. I think we can all certainly, or what I hope to share here is some things that few of my peers and colleagues in the community have found successful for us and have found to be successful working with teams on our own projects, just ways to keep ourselves focused, try and avoid frustration when feeling your way through the dark. And a lot of it is just, an engagement with yourself, being willing to ask questions, admitting when you need help. A lot of those are kind of growth opportunities that all of us go through. I think, for those of us here who have been through that, we can all say, going through that was worth it. Ultimately, in the end, it certainly sticks with you, and it certainly helps cultivate experience as well. And so, hopefully, we can go from a mindset where we feel compelled to move fast and risk breaking things to changing our outlook and realizing that we can achieve good things without necessarily having to sacrifice speed. One thing that I think is really important in terms of being able to do that is being able to distinguish what needs to be done versus what needs to be done now. There's a lot of, I often find it easy for myself to kind of start working on one thing and then get sidetracked and go down a rabbit hole. And possibly most of the time that thing I could just make a note, keep doing what I'm working on, and come back. So being able to kind of stay focused, but I don't think there's anything wrong with a healthy backlog. It's just a whole plethora of ideas. I mean, the idea is to be creative and not lose that, but still kind of maintain a degree of forward momentum so that eventually you get to the result that you're looking for. Because what I've really started to appreciate over the course of my career is that getting things out the door means a lot. Getting something into production or getting something published to GitHub that other people can use and take advantage of, that's a big deal in my experience. And I spent a lot of time thinking about just writing code and not getting things out, but then over time I realized that those technical purity tests or those making those hard edge decisions on like style guides or things like that, at the end of the day, if it's not out there, it's not really benefiting anybody. And then all that work, what is it? Maybe what's it for? So just basically I hope and encourage everybody to just realize that to do what you want to do, problem solving isn't a skill exclusive from anybody. Everybody is capable of it. We just approach it in different ways, and I think one of the ways that can make it easier for anybody is just to take that extra time to really understand what it is that you want to achieve, even be able to write it down, work on it bit by bit, and then reflect on it over time and make sure that you're still on track. So with that, I do have some links that were shared and some resources from those who helped me out. I highly recommend, Clean Code if you don't have a copy of it. Really good book on just kind of being able to write good software. Over time, that ability just becomes second nature, I think. So you kind of get to worry less about your decisions. But everybody's got to start somewhere, and don't worry so much about how other people get there. Just make a plan for yourself and measure yourself only against you. And also remember to have fun. But in addition to that, thank you.
Thank you, Owen.
All right.
Turn this off.
Got it in before that thing died again.
So any questions for Owen before? I have one. Where does whiteboarding fit in?
What's that?
Do you use whiteboarding though?
Do I whiteboard?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, much smaller one now that I work from home than when I used to work here, and they're everywhere. But yes, I am a sucker for to-do lists. I've actually had to train myself over time to not see a to-do list as necessarily like a competition against myself, and just kind of enjoy the kind of the ideation for what it is, like having the ideas. Like it's just nice to have them in your head. You know, you don't just try not to feel compelled to do everything. But yes, I have a little whiteboard that's sectioned out into these last 6 months of the year with all my different little things on it, with different colors. That's the important part. You got to get many colors. That's the pro tip. Sarah in the back.
Hey, but at least they give you one more question.
So you're talking about, hopefully those questions kind of related to what we're talking about, but you're talking about doing retros and how it's an iterative process to reflect on how you can improve over time. Have you looked at any sort of metric-driven solutions for looking at actual raw numbers and seeing how you can improve there and anything along those lines?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think different situations call for varying degrees of measurement. How I would measure myself at work might be, a little more stricter than how I'd measure myself on the side. I think a lot of it actually comes to setting reasonable expectations for yourself in the first place. I certainly know, coming from the junior development mindset when I started, I thought I could do everything like in a day, right? The biggest relief I ever gave to myself was giving myself more time than I thought it would take to do something. And so I think a really good first measurement is to be really honest with yourself and say, like, all right, with that deliberation of looking at the task, like, if someone told me they were gonna do that in sticker picker in like a week, if they weren't already, if they didn't already have, like, if they had a full-time job, you're like, maybe, but I'd say the risk is not so much that you can't do it, but the risk might be that you make yourself feel bad for not doing it, right? So I think, and again, it kind of goes back to, like, it's really usually not the technology that's the problem, it's like the communication and context. So, but for actual measurements, like say at work, part of my role is creating, even though part of my role is creating like tools for other developers, and that I don't actually work on any of like the customer-facing products, we still have a backlog, so we still treat all the features that we might put into our tools as like user stories. We'll still track bugs. We still track, how many people are using our different tools. What phases of interaction are they with us, like discovery, they're exploring it, they're actually using it, they've gone live. Bug counts are some of those. I only lead a small team, but I actually don't do estimates. We still size up a sprint, but they're called estimates for a reason, so I don't understand why people get so upset when they're wrong. So I think part of it is, just gauging the work and also understanding that different people have different capacities in and of themselves. So a lot of mistakes that you'll have is that the senior developer does all the estimating, and then the junior developer does all the work, and naturally, through no fault of the junior developer, it's going to take them like 1.5x, maybe even 2x to do that same task. And then, that's where all these traffic jams of things aren't getting done fast enough and things like that. So, I guess.
Do you have like actual visual representations of that data? And you see like, I averagely trend pretty high, I'm actually retrending.
Oh, yeah.
Underestimating, you can make those corrections.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's what's important is, the context is different, and it was still even a little challenging to me in certain ways to judge what they might refer to as KPI, so key performance indicators. So So one example at work, part of my work, like I said, is creating build tools. It's also maintaining a component library. So a couple metrics outside of just like bugs and stuff that I've tracked is uh, we we provide a starter repository for creating a new UI application, and I publish that to an internal private npm registry, and I'll let people install it through npm, and then they can pass parameters over the command line to like bootstrap it with their like app ID and like Google Analytics thing. So one thing I started to do is month to month, I counted the number of times that package was basically installed. So I could see month to month. In April there were 12 installs, but then in May there were 24 installs. I'd be like, all right, cool, people are actually using it. Same thing, I kind of take the npm downloads, and I can see of all our packages, our developers have kind of doubled. So in that way, I can basically monitor like usage. So obviously, we'll get bug reports, but it's also good to see, are people actually using it. So, download counts aren't perfect, but an upward trend is certainly a positive sign if your goal is to get people to use the tools that you build.
Basically, what you build, like, so as a starter, is product that other developers are using.
Yep.
Getting those metrics or essentially getting product metrics. You're seeing how successful you were in building that starter.
Right.
More people are using it. Maybe there's something wrong with it.
Exactly, and I thought that was actually kind of one of the more fun parts of this position that I just started about a year or so ago was I got to kind of create those KPIs. So not managers, like everybody on this central team, there's like a central team for auth and a central team for analytics, and I run the central team for UI, UX. So we were each kind of providing our own KPIs. Now they are managing APIs, so they also have very clear metrics of like how many times their APIs are getting hit. They might have metrics for 200s versus 500s, production incidences, outages, things like that. As far as for kind of your own work, I guess I would just say is, again, measure your progress against yourself. Don't feel compelled to, if it's not fun, then you're not going to have fun doing it. So above all else, give yourself the space and the benefit of the doubt to be like, I want to work on this project for the weekend. Let me just pick one thing. One of the classic sayings is under promise and over deliver. You can do that with yourself. Don't beat yourself up just because you want to try and figure something out over the weekend. If you can't, then just ask someone. Again, if you're trying to work on something and you are stuck but don't reach out, then will you be able to materialize? And that's I think the biggest joy of the creative process is actually getting the end result. So.
I just want to thank you for coming out and giving a talk like this. I think we see a lot of, predominantly, especially at Colorado, we've done a lot of the tech talks. The experience of actually, going in and doing some of the technical work, but the experience of day-to-day, working in the space is something that we don't spend a lot of time talking about, and sort of expect people to understand what that's like. And I think that we need to do more of these talks to open people's minds up to what it's actually like, not the idea of it.
That reminds me of another, I guess, tip is know your audience. One of the things that, working with different teams and different concentrations within an organization is, the conversation you might have with a fellow developer should probably be different than you explaining, something. So for instance, if you are trying to debug a bug, like the login button, when you click it, it doesn't work. Obviously, that's a bad thing. You're going to get the bug report. Some product owners will be like, oh my God, the button doesn't work. Can you fix it? the last thing they want to hear is like, yeah, well, I opened up the console, then I saw like a 500 error, so that's like the back-end guy's fault. You gotta go over there. It's like, just be like, I see the problem, I know what to do about it. Then go talk to the back-end developer, like, dude, your curl's a 500, like, WTF, mate. Like, I'm gonna assign that ticket to you, right? So, yeah. So that's another thing is, knowing your audience and being able to speak appropriately to different people, so you don't hopefully lose them. But yeah, it's I'll just emphasize it again. A lot of, at least my day to day, it's entirely based around technology. That technology doesn't happen without people putting something into place or installing something for you, or but it's very rarely an entirely solo effort, and so that human element is certainly something that you have within your control, even if you don't know the technology.
Just to build on top of that, nowadays you see a lot of people switching jobs from like X field to tech.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever like had to deal with imposter syndrome throughout your career? Having that?
Yeah, I'm just getting over it right at the end of this talk. No, it's funny to think about. I mean, that's kind of the joke implies that I've given plenty of tech talks. This is my first non-tech talk, and so I was
And just does everyone know what imposter syndrome is? Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say when I started out, I was fortunate. There was only like 3 of us in the office, so there wasn't it wasn't as overwhelming as I know it can be for a lot of new people starting out. I guess I would say this is probably where it's definitely has to be a two-way street. I mean, if you're hired as a junior developer, for example, I think that's often where it's most encountered or experienced is in that kind of, it's my first job or my first internship or whatever. I'm the little fish in a big pond kind of situation. I think so wherever you go, like I said, so it's got to be two-way in the sense that if you are stuck, you need to learn how to ask questions, right? Going a week and getting stuck on the same error, you'll have to kind of deal with the fact that it happens to everybody. I wish I knew a good way to kind of share that kind of consolation, I guess, other than just to say that it, just like when you think that people are thinking about that awkward experience, no, they're not thinking about you. They've got their own life, right? Trust me, they're worried about the awkward thing that they did with someone else from like 10 years ago. The last thing on their mind is you. So I think part of it is, having that, I would say, responsibility to, as they sometimes say, manage up a little bit. But if there isn't willingness on the other side to be like, great, let's jump into a conference room for 30 minutes. Why don't you show me what you're doing? And again, in terms of being an advocate for your own success, if you go in there and you're like, yeah, I got this, I tried this thing and it didn't work. Help them help you. And that's kind of why I go back to like that Stack Overflow post, because the whole perspective that it presents this recommendation for you is like, pretend you're asking a busy person at work. So, you're surprised how many people say something doesn't work and don't provide the error message. So provide the error message. Say what command you were running. Like I was following this guide. I got to step 3. I ran the command. Boom! It spit out this error message. I Googled. I found this. I found that. These things didn't work. Bam. That's a very small to medium Slack post or comment. And so yeah, but it can be challenging because the organization has to support you in terms of like, if we're hiring a junior developer, whoever your mentor or manager is, they have to be accepting of that fact. That's certainly something that Kenzen did really well, and so that's just another way to yield better results, right? Like thinking of people as like an investment and not necessarily like just code machines. Cool.
Any questions? Comments?
Last thing, if you're not in Providence Geek Slack and you'd like to stay connected with the community here, please feel free to come up after and reach out to me. I can send you a sign-up link.